Hello and welcome to This Date in History, aka T.D.H. This show is all about the events that occurred today in years past, both recognized by actual historians, but mainly things I personally find intriguing enough for me to bring to you. The source of this information comes from the smart device application Today in History on this day. For links to the app, music, and anything else potentially interesting, click the box below. Anyway, on with the show. Today is Thursday, aka Thursday, May 3rd, 2018. In 1481, the largest of three earthquakes struck the island of Rhodes, causing an estimated 30,000 casualties. In 1616, the Treaty of Loudun ended the French Civil War. In 1715, a total solar eclipse was visible across northern Europe and northern Asia, as predicted by Edmund Halley to within 4 minutes of accuracy. In 1791, the Constitution of May 3rd, the first modern constitution in Europe, was proclaimed by Sejm of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. In 1802, Washington, D.C. was incorporated as a city. In 1830, the Canterbury and Whitstable Railway was opened, becoming the first steam-hauled passenger railway to issue season tickets and include a tunnel. 18 years later, in 1848, the boar-crested Anglo-Saxon Bentley Grange helmet was discovered in a barrow on the Bentley Grange farm in Derbyshire. The next year, in 1849, the May Uprising in Dresden began, becoming the last of the German revolutions of 1848-49. In 1855, U.S. adventurer William Walker departed from San Francisco with about 60 men to conquer Nicaragua. In 1867, the Hudson's Bay Company gave up all claims to Vancouver Island. In 1901, the Great Fire of 1901 began in Jacksonville, Florida. 12 years later, in 1913, Raja Harishchandra, the first full-length Indian feature film, was released, marking the beginning of the Indian film industry. In 1921, West Virginia became the first state to legislate a broad sales tax, but did not implement it until several years later due to enforcement issues. On that same day, the Government of Ireland Act of 1920 was passed, splitting Ireland into northern and southern. In 1937, Gone with the Wind, a novel by Margaret Mitchell, won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. In 1945, during World War II, the prison ships Cape Acada, Theablick, and Deutschland was sunk by the Royal Air Force in Lubeck Bay. 2 years later, in 1947, the new post-war Japanese Constitution went into effect. The year after that, in 1948, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Shelley v. Kramer that covenants prohibiting the sale of real estate to blacks and other minorities were legally unenforceable. In 1951, the United States Senate Committee on Armed Services and U.S. State Committee on Foreign Relations began their closed-door hearings into the dismissal of General Douglas MacArthur by U.S. President Harry Truman. And I gotta say, what a backstabby move. The man who pretty much is the face of the US victories in the Japanese theater of World War II gets the boots from a bunch of pussies hiding behind closed doors, talking amongst themselves like the rats that they are. To treat someone like MacArthur like that is heinous. We should have just done what he advised in Glass, North Korea. In 1952, Lieutenant Colonels Joseph O. Fletcher and William P. Benedict of the United States became the first people to land a plane at the North Pole. On that same day, the Kentucky Derby was televised nationally for the first time, broadcasting on CBS. 5 years later, in 1957, much to my mom's dismay, the owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers, Walker O'Malley, agreed to move the team to Los Angeles. 3 years later, in 1960, the off-Broadway musical comedy The Fantastics opened in New York City's Greenwich Village, eventually becoming the longest-running musical of all time. On that same day, the Anne Frank House Museum opened in Amsterdam, Netherlands. In 1963, the police force in Birmingham, Alabama, switched tactics and responded with violent force to stop the Birmingham campaign protesters. Images of this violent suppression were transmitted globally, bringing newfound attention to the civil rights movement. A decade after that, in 1973, the 108-story Sears Tower in Chicago was topped out at 1,451 feet as the world's tallest building at the time. In 1978, the first unsolicited bulk commercial email, known as spam today, was sent by a Digital Equipment Corporation marketing representative to every ARPANET address on the west coast of the U.S. I believe I speak on behalf of the entire human species. F you Digital Equipment Corporation. F you right up the A. In 1987, a crash by Bobby Allison at the fencing at the start-finish lines at the Talladega Superspeedway, Alabama, led NASCAR to develop the restrictor plate for the following season, both at Daytona International Speedway and at Talladega. In 1999, the southwestern portion of Oklahoma City was devastated by an F5 tornado, causing the deaths of 45 people, the injury of 665 others, and $1 billion in damage. This twister was one of 66 from the 1999 Oklahoma tornado outbreak, and also produced the highest wind speed ever recorded at 301 plus or minus 20 miles per hour, or 484 plus or minus 32 kilometers per hour. The year after that, in 2000, the sport of geocaching began, with the first cache placed and the coordinates from a GPS posted on Usenet. In 2001, the United States lost its seat on the UN Human Rights Commission for the first time since the commission was formed in 1947. In 2015, 2 gunmen launched an attempted attack on an anti-Islam event in Garland, Texas, which was held in response to the Charlie Hebdo shooting. And in 2016, 88,000 people were evacuated from their homes in Fort McMurray, Alberta, Canada, as a wildfire blazed through the community, destroying about 2,400 homes and businesses. First, Bing Crosby, 1903, George Gaines, 1917, Sugar Ray Robinson, 1921. I mean, in all fairness, Gaines did mean happiness back in that time, so... And that concludes the show. Once again, check the underbar for any links you may be interested in. For your dose of past events daily, I am Aoxander, and you are you. Toodles!